Welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Veronica Leigh, author of the novel The Keeper of Lost Daughters. Veronica, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, let's jump right into your idea for this story that has Lydia having a stranger come to her door
Mhm.
with a child that she ends up adopting. Was this based on your just imagination or some historical fact that you came across?
It was somewhat of a historical fact. D During the war in Poland, Jewish families, to save their children, would sometimes put their children in Christian households. And then after the war, they would come back and want to reclaim the children. And that's kind of where this story comes from. And then, the Christian families didn't always really want to give them back. That's
Sure.
the rest of the story.
So were you able to find any kind of correspondence or stories similar to what you ended up sharing as a narrative here?
Um, nothing super identical. I did meet a lady. Her name was Ida, and it was like right before I started writing it, and she had talked about being placed in a home, a Christian home, when she was a baby, and she didn't know until a lot later that she was Jewish, but she was raised up in with them, although she wasn't treated very well. So that did kind of help, kind of like get me moving on the story.
Mhm.
But that was obviously a different scenario altogether than what I wrote.
Sure. Well, let's talk about Lydia, the protagonist here. What are her circumstances? What happens to her in the Keeper of Lost Daughters?
Well, she in the prologue, obviously she opens the door and meets a stranger who's um claims to be the father of one of her girls. Um um Kind of flashes back to the war where again opens the door and finds the baby on the doorstep of her home, and she's has this opportunity to save this child, and she does. And the story mostly follows her throughout the war and then and post-war too.
And how does she, like, what are the challenges for her? What was there any hesitation for her to make these decisions? And then, what kind of a family, like you had kind of mentioned already, sometimes they didn't want to give the child back. How was she able to build a loving family this way?
Well, with Lydia, she had always wanted children and she was never able to have any. So finding this baby on her doorstep was a definite opportunity for her to be a mother and to genuinely love the child. And that's pretty much what drives her throughout most of the story, is her love for Sophie. And of course, later, she doesn't want to give her up. She's raised her at that point for about 5 years. As far as she's concerned, that's her daughter.
And what about 1946? What's interesting for readers here in the post-war Poland? Because a lot of I'm American. Most of the time the history ends with 1945. Before then, we learn about the Red Scare in the 50s or
Yeah.
Vietnam in the 60s. So what's post-war Poland like that we might not see in the history books?
It was a very rough time. It's been said that second to only during the war, it was the most dangerous point in history for someone to be Jewish in Poland. They were coming back from the war. They wanted to return to their homes. They wanted to maybe reclaim their properties or their children. And Jewish people were being killed. Um, when it comes to like the Polish Christians, they were not targeted as much. Although the communists were starting to take over Poland, they had like an election. I'm trying to think. I think it's later in 1946, maybe like in September or in August, and the election was rigged. The communists came to power, and they kind of were under communist rule until it was either like 1989 or 1990. So that's what's pretty much going on in 1946. Very hard time to be alive.
Well, can you talk about confronting some of those harsh realities both during and after the war in your research? It sounds like it would have been very heavy to confront all those, and then using that to create a kind of a hopeful, heartfelt story. How was what were those challenges like for you?
Well, it was sort of in a way hard to believe that such terrible things continued to happen after the war. You'd think after maybe the liberations of the camps, the liberations of the countries, that maybe it'd become more peaceful, kind of like in a way how it did in America. But that definitely wasn't the case in Poland. Yeah, my some of the incidents in my book are pretty dark, but I do try to balance it out by more hopeful moments, um, focusing on like family and some faith aspects. Um,
Can you talk more about your own faith and how that maybe both contributed to and challenged your ability to share these characters on the page? Did you have to talk to rabbis? Did you have to do some research about Jewish, read some Jewish literature? Talk about that element of the story.
well, I'm a Christian, although I'm Protestant, so I had to do a huge deep dive into both Catholicism and into Judaism because growing up, I really didn't know a lot about either, to be honest. Um, yeah, I ended up watching documentaries. I read memoirs. I read books about Catholicism and Judaism, and it's probably a big emphasis in the story about sort of like, well, I mean, whenever I read about World War II or the Holocaust, my thought is like, okay, where is God in all of this? Why, how could this have happened? And that's often kind of referenced in my story, although I never did provide any answers because I feel I don't have the answers.
Well, of course, no one knows those answers, but it's good
Right,
to
right.
it's good to
But yeah, I mean,
talk
there have
about them.
been, some books that have, theological books that try to explain this or that. And I just
Mhm.
feel like, we can never know really
Yeah.
how and why.
So, what is your process like then before writing a novel like this? Do you spend a lot of time in research first and then create a narrative around that, or do you have the idea of the characters first?
I, when it comes to the subjects of my books, I usually start on the story and I already kind of know something about my subject matter already. And then, I kind of like do an outline and then do a first draft. And then I kind of do a deep dive and kind of discover, okay, what's going to work in the story, what's absolutely inaccurate, and then in the following drafts, I fix things and, of course, hopefully improve the writing style.
Can you talk a little bit about your own pathway to publication, your journey as a writer? This is not your first novel. You seem like a very prolific writer. How did you get to this place, and what have you kind of been confronted with and challenged with along the way?
Well, for years, and I'm saying like 20 some years, I had tried to get a literary agent because that way back then, that was the way to get into a publishing company. Not so much has changed since then with digital publishing, independent publishers. And I kind of had to change with the times. I finally just gave up trying to get a literary agent because it's just like I wasn't getting anywhere with it. So I submitted this one and another novel off and on throughout the years, trying to find a publisher. And this one had been rejected a lot. I'm talking like this last time I did submissions, it was like 46 rejections. One a couple I didn't hear back from, and then one that was accepted it. So I was like, okay, then that's it.
Well, that's certainly not uncommon. Have you managed to kind of build up your own audience over the years?
Um, yeah, more so this year actually. I've developed more of a platform and an audience. I think it's probably is because of this book. Before that, it was kind of hard to get readers and um, kind of engage people on social media, but it's become easier
Mhm.
since this book has come out.
Well, tell me about your publisher. Is it Read More Press?
Yeah, it's Read More Press. It's a small independent publisher. It's based in Israel. Um, I had kind of like stumbled on it online, seen a different book on Facebook. And I was like, oh, that book looks really nice. Where was it published? And so I kind of hunted down information about them and thought, well, I'll try it and see what happens. And it took some months to hear back. And then, like I said, they said, okay, we'll go forward with it.
That's great. Have they, was it like, I find that authors will work so long and hard on their story, and then it's always a bit of a shock when they do find a publisher who then says, okay, we need to fix this, this, and that. What was the editing process like for The Keeper of Lost Daughters?
Okay, so there actually wasn't one. um, and there are mistakes in the book. So that's been kind of a struggle for me.
That's interesting. I read so many Goodreads reviews, I didn't notice anyone pointing that out.
Yeah, there was some like grammatical and spelling, I think probably. Um, it was promised to me that they would, for I guess a different edition, maybe when it was re-released, they had fixed those. Um, like I said, on the flip side, it was nice to keep the story as I wrote it. I didn't have to change any characters. I didn't have to eliminate anything. So get the good and the bad.
Sure. Uh, I think I read that you have signed with another press for a forthcoming series. Is that right?
Yes, Level Best Books. They're like a mystery publisher. Uh,
Okay.
they're going to publish my first historical crime novel, Eye for an Eye, in August of 2026.
That's amazing. So you write in several different genres then? How do you
Yeah,
change from one to the other?
it actually helps just change. It doesn't. I don't have any real struggle going from one to the other. It kind of like a reprieve when I'm working on the crime. I can be in that mindset, and then when it's time to maybe go to a regular historical novel, just kind of I can separate myself and
Mhm.
write in this kind of style or this kind of mentality.
Well, and then I saw you also publish essays or short stories for
Mm.
The People's Friend and Black Cat Weekly and a couple others. What do you write for them? And why? Like, what do you enjoy about that?
Well, Black Cat Weekly is mostly a crime. I mostly write crime and murder mysteries for them. Um, yeah, I haven't seen anything lately. Um, but I've enjoyed working with them on those short stories. The People's Friend, I've sent a couple cozy mysteries to them, but mostly I've sent like little romances. So that's kind of like changing up genres again, but it's been nice to try something new.
Mhm. So writing so much, do you have a specific time of day that you do your writing, a certain word count you want to reach? How do you organize your day around all that writing?
Um, Generally, I try to write a couple hours after lunch. I tried to do about 1,000 words a day. That's pretty much all I'm good for.
Mhm.
Otherwise, then I start to space out and my focus isn't as good. Um, but so far, that's what's worked for me.
And do you find at all that you're writing for a certain market, or are you just writing for your interest, or some combination of the two?
A combination of the two. Um, uh, for like a number of years, I had wrote strictly mysteries and crime with the occasional gothic. Yeah, and then recently it is um, bit more of the short romances, but it's all been um, what I've been interested in at the moment, you know.
Hmm. Oh, well, let's return to the Keeper of Lost Daughters for a
Okay.
second. What ultimately do you want readers to take away? What's the message or the theme behind this story?
Um, just primarily that what happened during World War II and what happened in the Holocaust should never happen again. And I think that's what most people who write about this subject would say.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah,
Have you had the opportunity to travel out to Poland and see any of the?
I did. Before I wrote it, probably about 6 months before, I was in Krakow with a tour group, sorry, yeah, with a tour group connected to Candles Museum. Eva Kor was a Holocaust and Mengele survivor. Uh, she had been experimented on and survived, she and her twin. And she made yearly trips back to Poland and to Auschwitz. So I went on one of her tours and learned quite a bit. It was a very life-changing experience.
Are you writing another book related to this? This is the first in a series of two books?
No, this was just meant to be standalone.
Okay. I read
Yeah.
somewhere about Unforgettable World War II series. Is that
It's part of Read More had put out a series that
okay?
included this book, but they're none of them are connected. They're by
Okay.
different authors. They're just set, I think, in World War II, all of them.
So do you have any other historicals planned? I know you said you're working on that three-book series for
Yeah.
Level Best.
I have an outline for a novel in during the Gilded Age. I think that would be a change of pace from mystery and from World War II. Um, I just got to get going on it. I just haven't started yet.
Well, you sound extremely busy.
Yeah.
Do you have some interest outside of writing?
Well, I'm a reader. I like to go to museums. I enjoy watching period dramas. I'm
Hmm.
actually kind of a this kind of boring, but that's pretty much what I'm interested in.
Okay. Well, Veronica, thanks for joining me. Congratulations on The Keeper of Lost Daughters. And that's really important work. So I'm so glad that I'm able to talk to you about it and share it with our listeners.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I had a nice time.